The Center for Educational Media and the College of Education at Middle Tennessee State University are proud to offer professional development to K-12 educators in Tennessee through our online video library. These videos are aligned with standards set by the Tennessee Department of Education. For more professional development videos, check out our website at cem.mtsu.edu.
Once again, thank you guys all for coming, and we're going to launch into this next part. Oh no, I can't. So actually what we're doing, so first I'm Ethan. I work with the Center for Historic Preservation and Teaching with Primary Sources as a graduate research assistant.
And I'm Sarah, who Donna mentioned earlier this morning. I'm one of the archivists here at the Gore Center.
So I'm really excited about this session because we're going to be drawing from two different activities. So I've been working on creating a lesson plan titled Oral Histories and Historical Memory, the Experiences of Soldiers in the Second World War. And Sarah has been so kind to take her time and go through all of the different Tennessee maneuver sources. So we're going to start with an oral history, and then we're going to transition into looking at some of these primary sources from the Tennessee maneuvers that the Albert Gore Center has. And also, this lesson plan is still in development, so I'm going to pass those out later. If at any point you guys have any comments or you have any recommendations for how to do this, please let me know, because we're wanting to make sure this lesson plan is ready to go, and we plan to present it at a conference maybe sometime later. So first off, I'm going to hand out the following materials. You can hand out Jesse, and I'll hand out the questions. All right, so everybody should have a copy of Jesse A. Beasley's oral history. So all of these are drawn from a website on the Library of Congress called the Veterans History Project. And in it, they've collected oral histories, audio interviews, materials, letters, all sorts of things of veterans that served from World War I to the war in Iraq. So with World War I centenary coming up, the ending tomorrow, this would be great for you to slot in on Monday, or you can choose any other type of war. So this lesson plan is designed to be modular and designed to be fit to whatever y'all's needs are. But first, I want you to individually read through Jesse's oral history. The front part is the background they give on him on the Library of Congress website, and also gives his biographical information and some of the places he served, while the back is actually excerpts from the transcript of his oral history. And while you're going through that, just read that and fill out your questions to ask your oral history worksheet, and then we'll reconvene and see what you guys got. All right, so now that you've answered some of these questions to ask your oral history, you're looking at these things and you're picking up some historical, you're picking up your historical knowledge. You're learning more about the experience of this soldier. And so this next part, we're handing out what's called our HIPPO worksheet, and this one is online. And so one of the things that this lesson plan focuses on is we focus on perspective, and we focus on, point of view in addition to the oral histories. So with this in mind, I want y'all to use an elbow partner or whoever's closest to you, and then you're just going to go back through the document again with your elbow partners, and you're going to fill this one in, and then you're going to talk about, with the paying particular attention to maybe what the point of view for this oral history is from and what his perspective was like. So we'll go ahead and hand these out, and as soon as you get them, you can start discussing and filling these out.
Yes. So from workshop that was given to us, I can't remember what the last one.
Yeah, it's just too much stuff to get through.
Oh, how's the teaching up through the World War II?
Yeah.
Not World War II, Civil War.
Realistic. It's what he was feeling, right?
Yeah.
Realistic feels. He had the feels, man.
What actually happened? What?
Point of view. What's the point of view? Point of view.
Yes.
And that he discusses the natural fear coming from freeing those overtaken by Germany.
Okay, so we've had a chance to look through your oral history questions. We've had a chance to look through your hippos. So now, yeah, just report out to me. I mean, we were drawing from both of these different graphic organizers. So I guess the best place to start with is on the main questions to ask your oral history, what were some of the things that y'all observed?
I think one of the things that we had talked about was just how, maybe even just for a lack of a better term, Hollywood tends to portray World War II as this wonderful, courageous, I don't know. I don't know how else to explain it other than it's completely different than Jesse A. Beasley's perspective, having been there, seeing the atrocity and the horror and the fear that came across when we tend to think of World War II as young men excited for the adventure of going out and seeing the world and fighting, the enemy. And it wasn't necessary. I mean, maybe that's what they were. That was their job, and they did it because that's what they were told to do. But it wasn't something that they would have chosen to do on their own.
Right. It drives home the fact that these 18 and 19-year-olds are going through this process. Like you said, it takes some of the glitz and glamour out of it, and sort of shows that. Right.
But I think most of them joined because you were just expected to do that. If you couldn't join, you weren't looked at quite as well. So I think, they just felt it was their duty. So many young boys were going to college or going to a job, and they didn't. They went to the military.
A lot of times it seems like, one generation forgets, war, and another generation, because, the only war I can remember in my lifetime, is, of course, after 9/11. But, and it seems like when you study it, it gets that same attitude when something happens, like where it's Pearl Harbor or whatever. It's that idea of I'm going to go and defend my country, I'm going to be the brave, and it kind of romanticizes it. And then when they actually get there, and, even as Americans, you sit there and you kind of get that spirit, then you start seeing the bodies come back. You start hearing, like we was talking about post-traumatic stress disorder and shell shock, and you start seeing them come back missing limbs, and you start seeing all this. It kind of changes the attitude, and it seems like when the war is over, by the time the next one comes in, you forget that, and you have the whole romanticized attitude again. And I think that's one thing he was trying to say is, like she was saying that, how it was romanticized, that unless you experience, you don't know it. But, and you forget that even when you see the body bags come back, you see them going through shell shock or post-traumatic stress disorder, you see them come back missing limbs, it seems like you forget that and you start romanticizing it, the whole idea over again.
I just, going to her point about movie, I think Saving Private Ryan took a lot of romanticism out of it. It was on Omaha Beach, and
Band of Brothers was the same way.
Pardon?
Band of Brothers,
I had
that's
excellent.
a phenomenal series about D-Day and World War II.
I woke up this morning, was watching, They Were Expendable. You can't watch that and think it. But there were some. Burma was another movie. There were some back there that were pretty bad. But, yeah.
So, with Band of Brothers and Saving Private Ryan, we're talking about, I remember first time watching those, and oftentimes your students will, know a lot about history from the pop culture, and the things like that. So with that in mind, was there any new historical knowledge that you gained from this oral history? Anything that sort of changed the way that you might have thought about the experiences of the soldiers in World War II?
His specific description of one part where he's talking about when he had to swim and how many layers of clothes he had on and how heavy they were. I guess even after all the knowledge that, not that I have a vast amount of knowledge, but I feel like I have a little bit, that's one aspect that I never really thought. And every one of them would have been in that situation because they would have had the same uniform on. And they would have had to carry that around because most of them did swim into the shore. So I never really thought about that. And that would have been, probably easily 100 pounds or more of just clothes and gear.
Especially when it gets wet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anybody else see anything that sort of changed the way that they, new historical knowledge gained from this oral history?
I think I kind of think about bullets flying as they almost having a honing device to get to whatever it is they're trying to hit. And for him to be able to say that I felt the heat from the bullets passing by, for whatever reason, that just kind of stuck in my head as I was reading it. Just thinking, oh my goodness, that's so real to realize that some of them were literally cheating death in some of those instances. and then to be able to come home and talk about that, or maybe not talk about it, but just to live it and relive it, watching people on either side of you, in front of you, and back of you, losing their lives as these bullets are heating through or passing by you, like leaving their mark. They're still leaving their mark on them.
I think it's a good teaching tool, like you said, with Private Ryan, because when you see that part and show that in your class, and if you showed this secondly, then you've got, well, here's the movie, now let's see what a person who actually was on that beach and experienced it, and see if they parallel each other with the movie. And I think that would open up quite of a good discussion, that, well, it wasn't just done for fun for us to watch the movie, how they landed, how they went in, because it shows the guys going over and trying to get their packs off, you know. It shows them, it shows the bullets going into the water, and it shows it hitting the soldiers. And he was saying, you know, I just prayed that I wouldn't get hit, and I could feel them going by, you know. I mean, that's, I think another thing you have to remember with these people, too, a lot of them, in the last 10 or so years, I would say, are sharing their stories where they've kept them quiet, but they're in their final years, and they want people to know what happened. I mean, I really think that's a big part of the stories that are coming out now of what they did, you know, but now they're willing to say, some won't, even still to this day, though.
Just to speak to what you're saying about, say, so my dad at 18, graduated from high school, joined to get a better life, and then the war started. By the time the war started, he was married, and off he went. And of course, training went to several places like Texas and California, but he never talked about the war. Mother was the only one that mentioned a few things, but never like the war. But one thing that also standing out that no one's kind of mentioned, so he went over under Patton's 13th Armored Division. He did liberate concentration camps because I asked him one time, and he was over there for a very long time. And when he got back, anyway, he was back home with his wife and now baby daughter, not me, and he had like just a short leave before he was just like this man going off to the Japan arena, and they were out shopping and all the church bells started ringing, and it meant they surrendered Japan. But you can ask my parents till they died. They absolutely agreed that bomb had to be dropped, because so many more, hundreds of thousands of soldiers and young men would have been lost, because they would have guerrilla warfared us to death. So that I was so blessed, you know, that I had my father, and he didn't live but till 62, and so he didn't share. And I think that was an important thing. They're not sharing to their very old, and they notice looking around that no one else remembers them or knows what they did. But I just want to state, I asked Dad, well, how long were you in the Army? Because he never talked about it, so I thought it was like blasé, and he went 5 years, 6 months, and 23 days. And I was like, whoa, boy, you were excited about that. So anyway, I had to share that.
And that's the piggyback on that. You know, mine was a navigator on a B-17, and you know, there's a lot to that. And to me, you know, he shared, but when he was gone, and as I teach more and more, I wish I would have asked more. Yeah. You know how that is. Yeah. But the thing for me was one of the B-17s came into Wichita, and an 85-year-old pilot of that called me and took me through that plane. And it was amazing. And when you go up in those things, like you say, and he said, well, you know, the two targets was the bombardier and the navigator. Yeah. And then it kind of dawned on me, well, where did he sit? And he showed me where he was, you know, just right below the, and yeah, and that hits home, but you can share that with your kids. Yeah. And that way those youngsters know that this was real. It wasn't just something, you know, that, you know, it just was what they did. And you know, I'm like you, there's just more things you'd like to have asked, and now they're gone.
Well, and there's two more things, because just like what you said. So they asked him to go to officer training school. But he said no, because they picked the lieutenant off first, because then the guys don't know where they're going. And then they asked him to be a paratrooper. He was doing that, but he was a medic, so they wanted him to be a medic in the paratroopers. And my mother put a foot down, because who's the first person they shoot as they come down through the sky is the medic, so he can't help the wounded. So who would know? That wouldn't be in the history book. So.
Nope.
And Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
My husband's grandfather was on the second wave at D-Day, and he went to see Saving Private Ryan, and the one thing, he never talked about the war, ever, ever, ever. After seeing that, he said, someone looked at him, and all he did was look at them and said, they got it almost right, there wasn't enough blood. That there was way more, and then I remember watching Saving Private Ryan thinking, oh my gosh, how horrific that was, all of those bodies just laying there, all the blood in the water. And for him to say that it was pretty close, except that there wasn't enough blood, made it that much more real, that happened on a much more grand scale than we can even see in the movie. So being able to watch the movie, I think, is a great, and like what you were saying, watching the movie and then showing this other perspective from someone who was there is brilliant, and I think it can really solidify what the kids are learning when it comes to.
Did it bother him to watch it?
Oh, yes.
And I mean, Beasley's story is so powerful and is so compelling, and you can gain a lot just from like the historical knowledge point of it too. But then with these oral histories, it's always interesting to look at the perspective and sort of, the point of view of the person that's telling it. So, with Beasley, I mean, he lands on D-Day. What would the perspective have been like from a different soldier, What did they see, what were they thinking? So with that kind of in mind, with the point of view and perspective, can you guys talk a little bit about sort of what you thought the point of view was and what his perspective was, during the event and sort of after the event?
Your perspective is what's in front of you. If you look at, someone did a study on Civil War soldiers, I can't remember, and they found that, we talk about these great battles and what have you, but the historian was saying, you got to look at the perspective of the oral history. His history is what he sees in front of him. He doesn't look at all. He's trying to survive. So the perspective, I thought, was this was his perspective. This is what's in front of me. This is what I'm wearing. That's how I interpret it there. Instead of the grand scale and all that, there's just one guy out there getting shot at.
Right.
Did he write more? I know we couldn't have, about because how many countries he went through?
So as far as this one goes, I know that the transcript mostly focuses on sort of his introduction period and then the D-Day period. He does talk a lot about sort of the the days after, with the invasion of France. And then of course with this collection, it also has the audio interview in there, and it has some other materials that are attached to him, such as letters and transcripts. And if I'm not mistaken, it also has a video of this interview too. So you're talking about Saving Private Ryan, and then this. I mean, this is obviously something that you can condense down to the handout that I have right here, where you're just looking at the transcript, or you can open it back up and you can have your students look at this profile on the Veterans History Project. So that's sort of where we're going with this part of the lesson plan. And this next part, we're going to go into the Tennessee maneuvers. And we chose Beasley's account because, this is a guy that was there at D-Day. He saw what it was like. And then Tennessee maneuvers, by contrast, show the training of the soldiers at home and what the civilians were going through. So it's like you see the end result, but then we're going to look at sort of the training period too. So now I'm going to have everybody number off 1 through 5, and we're going to get into some groups. So 1,
2,
3,
4,
5,
1, 2, 3.
4, 5, 1, 2, 3.
4.
Okay, perfect. So trying to think of the best way to do this. We can get the 1s up here and right here. We can get the 2s here. We can get the 3s here, 4s there, and then 5 kind of in this back area. Okay. So everybody's got their couple of sources. So these sources were pulled together by Sarah here. They're absolutely fantastic, and we paired them so that way they're kind of 2 sources that are in dialogue with each other. And so what you'll do with this one is after you get your sources, you're going to analyze them using this investigative question I wrote on the board. So we're really focusing on all of these soldiers' experience, the civilian experience, sort of taking the emphasis off the massive block arrows you see on the campaign maps and the little explosion marks to get at the people that were, part of this process as human beings. So whenever you're looking at these sources, just keep that investigative question in mind and then make your analysis based on that question. So For instance, if you have one where there is a plane, plane crash, how did World War II impact the soldiers and civilians? You can start talking about how training was also dangerous. You didn't just die in combat, you could also die during this process too. So I'll give you guys a few minutes to look at that, and if you have any questions about the analysis, just let me know. Write any of your observations on one of the back of your other graphic organizers, please.
This is in Nashville. Supposed to go in there doing their training missions, going in, down, coming back up, and so forth. The B-26.
Graduated into the military.
Look at that, man. What if that?
So maybe these are some of the young kids that would have been living in the dorms, like here, as far as
Must
making the
have been
connection.
officers then.
Yeah.
Because if you're in college,
To watch them train. You can kind of see just a little bit traces that romanticizing of the war just in this picture right here.
She said that part of the movie, it really wasn't
The atmosphere, the air, the windows, yeah, you'd think they could shatter, it could break. But like even if you think Lynn like that, so for some reason.
Earth, who's apparently 5th District riding Jim.
All right, so real quick, since we're running a little short on time, what I'm going to do is have us combine the two steps together. So continue looking at your primary sources with that question in mind, but then also the note cards I passed out, I want y'all to create an exhibit label for your primary source, and then a couple of, like a paragraph, 3 or 4 sentences that talk about your primary source, and then we're going to put them up and we're going to have a gallery walk towards the end. So while you're doing that, just go ahead and create an exhibit label for your primary sources and write 2 or 3 sentences that describe your primary sources.
You probably have the most legible handwriting, but I can write one.
You see my handwriting.
All right, I'll do it. That's okay. We'll start with this one. What's something?
A picture of the damage.
It was a photo.
Right.
That this person took.
What were our two?
What was the second thing?
Things.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't explain that. So you'll just create an exhibit label, and then for each one of your sources, and then do like a couple of short sentences describing what your source is.
So one.
So as y'all get done with your exhibit labels, you can go ahead and come up to this board and we'll pin them on there.
Oh, that's
Looking towards it off the stage.
Since she's from Warren County, did you by any chance have Mildred Simmons?
Yeah.
It's a great photo.
Did you think you may have? Oh, no, I didn't. Some of the
Some of the ways that the questions were worded, kind of like on the second, like on the...
All right, everybody. So if there's one thing I've learned, it's not to stand between anybody and their lunchtime. So we about out of it. So what we can do is as y'all are leaving for lunch, you can take your time to sort of walk through and look at the different sources. Ideally, you would talk about how the Tennessee maneuvers sort of, connect with the oral histories that you've been reading. And then also a couple of parting notes. So the lesson plan that I demoed for you guys earlier with the oral history, there's a second part in which you have students explore historical memory and the way that we remember things. Which is, we got some videos for that. I gave each group a copy of the lesson plan. So while y'all are out today, just kind of flip through it. We have some Post-it notes right here that I can pass out that you can put your comments on the lesson plan and the activities here, because we're always looking for feedback from the teachers in the actual classroom and letting us know how those processes go. And then Sarah has something that she wanted to show y'all real quick. When this lesson plan goes in, we're going to have a pillowcase extension for this. So there were pillowcases made for the Tennessee maneuvers. And she's got a couple of examples right here, and she can explain them a little bit better than I can.
Yeah, so they're basically seen as souvenir objects for the soldiers that were here training, something to send home to loved ones. I'll show a few others that have messages to their wives or significant others or their mothers especially. So this is kind of just a generic, 2nd Army was the unit that was typically here in Tennessee training, along with the 101st Airborne. So here's one too. Someone's mom with a nice little poem message. And there are a lot of these. You can find these on eBay. That's where we've gotten a lot of ours. We probably have one of the country's largest collection of maneuver pillowcases. We have about 40, I want to say.
Hope they're original.
They are. Well, yeah, eBay does get kind of iffy checking those.
If they're coming from Germany, they're probably not original, huh?
Made in China.
How exactly were they made though?
What do you mean? They're like sewn.
They're sewn on.
Yeah, and then you see the back here. You put the
pillow goes here.
Pillow goes
slot
here.
there.
Yeah, I mean, the stuff on the front, is it stitched or is it like ironed
I
on?
think they all kind of vary. This one looks like it was more ironed on, maybe. So then, yeah, the kind of the activity that goes along with this is more of just a craft activity. So there's different photos of those that we have, and then this is a former student of ours who used to work at the Gore Center, made this up a couple years ago, and it's design your own pillowcase. So you can explain what the maneuvers are, show them some photographs of some of the souvenirs, and then they can design their own any way they want. Yeah.
Awesome. So once again, any comments you have on lesson plan is great, and thank you so much. Hope you learned a little bit about the soldiers' experience in World War II.